Okay, we're live. So this is episode 59 of the Lost and Found Bin. I appreciate everybody being here. We have quite a few people waiting, and that's really wonderful here. All right, Chick, I don't even know where to begin with this. What do you how so we had the whole big confirmation thing going on. We've got we had this thing, yesterday I tweeted out about Virginia Beach in Norfolk being Norfolk, Virginia. It's on the East Coast in the mid Atlantic of the East Coast. And I was talking about what my contact had told me, saying places like that in San Diego are going to be important for this whole UFO UAP thing that's coming up. And suddenly, hours after I had tweeted out about it, this article from their local paper there, the Virginian Pilot, um, there was a shooting there, a mass shooting, and it was. I just want everybody, if you're listening and you're from the area, or if you're not, or if you have relatives, I'm thinking about you, and I'm sorry that this happened. But it goes back to this odd patterning that sometimes now is frightening, and it's frightened me before with the Mandela Effect, chick.
Yeah, this is definitely moving a lot faster than I think we could have imagined. Even though, like, you had a heads up for a while that things were, information was going to come out and things were going to drop and everything like that. This is still very much taken me by surprise, like how much has happened this week.
It's mind altering, and it was getting to the point where I couldn't even keep up with the articles that I was tweeting out. It was so massive, and the information was coming out so fast, and the different agencies were now speaking up and saying that, indeed that they're tracking X, they're tracking Y, they're tracking Z, and it's just all coming up, and I don't know what to say. I don't know what to think of it. People are saying San Diego. That's where I live. I lived in Virginia Beach for a year in the '90s. Yeah, so if you know San Diego and Virginia Beach, they're part of that Navy circuit. I come from a Navy family, so you'll know that those areas are heavy Navy areas. And if this UFO UAP thing is tied heavily to the Navy, which is obviously always out to sea with those cruisers and battleships, they're obviously going to come into contact because the information we're getting is these things come from the sea and they're from above. But anyway, I'm digressing here. So I don't know. I don't know. I think too a little bit of the conversation we had beforehand is probably important here. Do you mind repeating that for everybody? Because what you told me, I think, is a bit significant here.
Um, well, one of the things that we went into, and we just got to chat like 5 minutes before we went on air, was the the basically, I feel like a whole bunch of things were supposed to happen in the natural, unfolding of events. There were supposed to be events that would take us in a very different direction. And be that whatever it is, a natural disaster, World War III, or whatever it was going to be. And because those things have not happened, and there's some kind of a deliberate effort to put the massive endgame event off,
Mhm.
basically forever, like kick the can down the road, all kinds of things are coming out now that feel weird, that almost feel like they're not real. And I
Mhm.
think it's because it's such an alternate line of events than what we were ever supposed to be on. But I imagine because these big, massive, distracting events are never going to happen now, all kinds of things are going to come to the surface that we otherwise would have never ever found out.
Right. I think you're absolutely right. It has a lot to do with timeline shifts, Mandela effect shifts. We know from other documents like even beyond the Gateway document. There's DIA documents and everything like that. There's the round robin document, the FBI round robin document that talks about the way in which it's very occult how these things work. It's vibrational frequency. It's very one of the basic tenets of hermeticism about the frequencies, and they sort of dial into the channel is how I put it. And I think I actually had this idea that Mandela effect shifts are part of the way in which they travel. And if you think about a Mandela effect shift, what happens if you think about retrocausality in terms of the cross section of the Mandela effect? What happens is instantly our reality has changed in the present, and usually our reality has changed somewhat in the past somehow. And then while that's happening, you've got to think about at the subatomic and at the atomic and at the molecular level, things are shifting around while we have a Mandela effect shift, right? Now, imagine during that state of chaos and confusion, whether it's natural or whether or not it's, let's see, I guess Buster's not with us. I'll try to keep up with everybody here. Um, so, you have that moment of chaos. Maybe it's just a split second, but while that's happening, perhaps you can bend those rules and you can travel to this frequency, or you can, not even, it's not really a traveling, it's a matter of tuning into this frequency and so to speak, because oh, thanks, Buster. I appreciate that. And thank you, Glenn Smith, very, very, very much for the super chat. That's really great. We do a lot of work and a lot of research over here. And the thumbs up are just as awesome, everybody. If you can't throw in something, that's just fine. So, Chick, I was thinking about that. What if the Mandela effect and the Mandela effect shifts are a form of travel? Because think about it, things have changed. What happens? You think about change and everything. And when you get on a plane, you go from point A to point B. When you land in point B, suddenly um, you find yourself in a different place, and we use planes, but what if they use vibrational frequencies and boom, they immediately pop in here. So, hey, thank you very much, Union. Thank you very much. And again, if you want to pronounce that for me correctly, if I mispronounce that, I mean no disrespect, and I apologize. But thank you for the super chat. But yeah, what do you think about that? You think that's plausible? I mean, I don't know.
I think it's very plausible. And like, there's a couple of different things coming to mind right now. One is the vile vortices. We talked about 2 episodes ago, I believe, about how many new ones have come up. The Bennington Triangle and all of these other. It used to be really just the Bermuda Triangle was this strange, bizarre place. And I have heard stories long ago that people would see things flying up out of the Bermuda Triangle and flying up
Mhm.
out of Mount Shasta and flying up out of the weird places where the what would you even call them? It's not even just electromagnetic distortion. It's just like a distortion field in reality itself. And I've often heard stories about that, but I didn't know what to think about it because, as you mentioned before, unless you were somebody that had real knowledge of it, it seemed very fringe. And unless it's
Mhm.
something you really kind of had some kind of contact of or deep understanding of, a lot of people, as soon as you start to talk about discs or anything like that, they just shut off. They're like, oh, okay, you're way out on left field. And it wasn't that I disrespected people who thought about that. I just literally didn't have any context. So when people would tell me that, I would just be like, I couldn't quite. Um, it's not that I didn't believe them, but I just couldn't quite understand the enormity of what they were telling me. And I was just
Mhm.
like, well, perhaps it's such a distortion field that it looks like things are happening, but who even knows what's happening in those places?
Oh, totally. I think you're totally on it. I think something like places like that where the veil is very thin, like we have thank you, Steve Turner. Oh, and Shiyun, and thank you again. I appreciate that. Everybody with just all the support is so wonderful. Thank you. But the thing about it is you've got those places like Skinwalker Ranch, like Shasta, like the Bermuda Triangle, all those places. I know that there's one in I think north of Japan or somewhere around there. There's all these places that are like that. And I think if you have a combination of something like that and then you have a shift or you have just the right number of variables, you can do something a bit bigger than clicking out. It's a bit more than sort of a three-person formation where they're able to click out. You're talking about, you hear stories of entire bases that have been clicked out, that have been that have been seen from the shores of Oregon. Then suddenly they click out instantly, and you're just like, holy cow, what's happening? And suddenly it's just so outrageous, and yet here we are. UFOs are now real. We know alien technology is being warehoused. We know there's alien alloys out there. And suddenly, in terms of the fringe ideas that are, our Overton window, we're suddenly now kind of moderate in a way. And our speculations are becoming less and less far out. And you have to start thinking about people who have much, we're really close. I try to, in you and Buster and everyone, we try to stay close to the documentation. Oh, wow, we're getting a lot more super chats. M. Hawkins, thank you so much, everybody, for the super chat. Steve, I got you. Shionin, thank you again. So much for the super chats, everybody, and thumbs up. We got 71 watching. Let's get some more thumbs up out there. But you know, you know, I don't know. I don't know. I think things are happening so fast. It's hard to keep up with. Um, what is exactly how far can we go and still maintain credibility? Now, I've always tried to stay based in something that I can have that's tangible for everybody in the chat in terms of the Mandela effect, whether it's Gateway, whether it's the DIA documents, whether it's round robin, whether it's psychotronics, no matter what, we've always tried to stay grounded like that. But at this rate that we're going, and even with this history channel thing that they got going on, we could end up being no longer fringe at this point. I have no idea what they're dropping next. My contact is telling me at this point, in a week and a half from now, there's going to be another major data drop, and he was telling me in late April that this moment that we're having right now would be a reality.
I like at this point, just as you said there, in the earlier times, we were afraid to go too far off the handle because a lot of us were still just trying to make sense of what was going on here, this whole Orion thing. And now the things they're talking about, just as you mentioned there, are like on the opposite end. With how crazy things are getting, it almost seems tame what we're saying. Like things have literally crossed that line into completely crazy now, where things that would never have been admitted before are completely admitted and out there in the mainstream and ignored by the vast majority of people. And I'd say we're going to get a lot more information. And this may seem like an irrelevant point, but I thought it was important to bring up. Yesterday, I had seen all the episodes of Black Mirror before on Netflix, but I didn't bother with the new one because my television wasn't able to do it. But anyways, I saw the new interactive, and I thought it was just going to be like, one of those Goosebumps books from the 90s, like Choose Your Own Adventure. But there was a lot deeper information in that episode, and it wasn't good. Like, I could feel the very bad vibes coming from this show. Like, I'm pretty darn sure that it's not anybody who's friendly to us that this information is coming from, whether the writers know what they're channeling or not. But there's these certain junction points, you might call them destiny points or whatever, that in this situation where you're making different decisions in this person's life and you keep looping back to different points, that may in fact be mirroring the kind of travel that you're talking about there, with not just like in a Mandela sense of like a different map or a different thing like that, but there could be certain decision points that are actually more like junction points, like highway points that you can get on and off of. So you're not just going in one lane, like in one direction far out like we are, but the ones who have control of where they're traveling to could actually be visiting the same junction points in history over and over again in a clicked out fashion. And that might be what they were trying to show us with that show, because Ronald Reagan was talking about this. It could be something that's happening now, but it's not just encapsulated into now because they're able to visit different junction points in history to get to different points on the map geographically and also in time, superpositionally.
No, totally, totally. And could you imagine that the Mandela effect this whole time we've completely missed it? And we've called it the Mandela effect, but yeah, like Linessa is saying, what if we're talking about something like a Stargate? The Mandela effect is actually, and the ramifications of the Mandela effect, they are actually the what we've noticed that's happened after a jump like this is made. It's sort of like the exhaust fumes that are left afterwards in our reality, or something, the wear and tear of the subatomic world that's left afterwards, just like you're saying. And what if, like you're saying, there's only certain junction points where you can actually make the leap and the jump, and we keep thinking linear. Well, we don't. But if we have any new folks, don't think linear. Go back to some of the older episodes, throw out linear time, read the gateway process. Linear time is garbage. It's complete bunk. It's absolutely here to imprison us, at least you in your mind. And if you read the gateway document, that is an actual prison, then your mind. But you're right. What if there are junction points, whether it's, I don't know, like you said, the Reagan era, the Civil War, just especially places where there's high, or they create these places like a war or something like this. So you have a high state of chaos and emotion. That way, you create this sort of molecular camouflage. So you're able to make that kind of pass through. And oh man, holy cow.
I think that that's quite what's going on, and unfortunately, I feel like we're coming to it like later in the game, and now it's not even outrageous because whatever the next drop is going to be is probably going to be so outrageous that we can't even get our heads around it at this point.
Well, and that's just the thing is, for me to even come up with this concept that the Mandela effect could be is something that it's time, it's travel, it's not even time travel, it's dimensional travel. It's something, I think it's even on the tip of my tongue in terms of I don't even know. It's something way bigger, and I almost feel like you're saying, I think it's a junction point. I think it's a mechanism. I think it's something much bigger. And I think that from what I was told by my contact, there's sort of these two sides. There's this naturally flowing side that they know that they've always been here. There's been sort of this kind of harmony, kind of not, but it's always been kind of working. And then there's this other side, CERN, that's trying to create these kinds of, I guess, for lack of a better word, these junction points or these stargates or whatever, but these tears. They're trying to make themselves rather than those ones that may have already been there. And that's another thing where, you think about, places like stadiums where there's a lot of emotion and things like that. And you always hear about things like archons. And I can say that now. I don't mind saying that. The world is so weird now. I wouldn't have said archons as much, as because it sounds like so outrageous that you have these interdimensional beings that actually feed off of our energy. And we're like food sources for them, like some kind of weird thing. It's like a esoteric version of the Matrix. But now I don't mind uttering the word archon now, because it's like, yeah, CERN, exactly, Buster. Sounds like CERN is creating artificial portals. Exactly. Portals, jump points, jump rooms, junctions, whatever. We're creating the language on the fly here. But what if these things, there's two, and my understanding is there's at least two sets of these things, these UFO things. And, I think we also too have to get our head around, just because it looks like, quote, a tic tac, or the way that they were describing it in all the articles that are out there and everything. We don't necessarily have to say that that's a craft. That could be a being that has yet to manifest in a form that we understand, that's a humanoid form, or even a form that's, remotely something that we're used to. You've got to remember that this is something that is from a completely alien, pardon the pun, frequency, that is just absolutely it. The way that its presentation is obviously irrelevant, considering the stress that they cause these Navy pilots whenever they make their presence known. However, you know, I will go back to saying that what we are seeing, my contact at least has said, they've always been here. They've always been here. It's just that this illusion that we've always had is being lifted. That's the only difference. That's it.
Oh, Steve Turner just went wild and gave $100. Oh my gosh, thank you.
Oh, wow, Steve. Thank you. You guys, thank you very, very, very much. And I
My
want you to
goodness.
know this money, what we're going to do is we're going to do something. I want to do something really cool. Like, I'm not a, I'm not, I don't have the efficiency of like an audio or a video engineer, but I would like to do some kind of small, maybe mini documentary or something like this. And I've thrown out the idea to Buster and Chick, and everybody seems kind of jazzed on the idea of doing something very cool. So the money, that's what it's going to go to, is things like that. So thank you very much. Also, further along, it helps with like burner phones and stuff like that, encryption software, because the team, we're working on all kinds of different things. So thank you so much for that. We really appreciate that.
I think that yes, also thank you very much from the whole team here. But I'm just, oh gosh, what was that point I was just thinking of there about the junction points? Um, I I mean, I never thought that there was a positive end to, like, actually I thought that CERN was like a cover story. But I mean, I would entertain the idea now that they were creating tears and junction points for us to move away from the end game event.
Hmm.
But they didn't had no idea how to close them.
Hmm.
So now the kind of the veil or the fabric that was keeping certain things out of your perception is now so riddled with holes like Swiss cheese that
Hmm.
anything could have followed and anything could have been ahead of us. You know
Hmm.
what I mean? It's not going to be
Yeah.
very easy to keep things separate if you're going to keep punching holes in everything.
Yeah, and what if that's the point, is to keep this thing open, wide open, and that's the nefarious thing, is that you have something like a Skinwalker Ranch where it may have happened naturally, but because of different kinds of processes and different kinds of cultures that were pre-European, they were able to maintain control of those processes, and through some kind of work in terms of craft work or something like that, they've been able to maintain those tears in terms of North America. But what if you have something now that they're trying to take something that was natural, even though it seems alien to us, but something that was actually natural, and the populations that were used to sort of, for lack of a better word, guarding those tears, they're trying to replicate. And this is speculation on my part. It's getting so weird. You can speculate, and well, we can almost throw anything up at this point. But what if, they're trying to do that, and then they accidentally keep that tear, and it's done. That's it. There's no closing it like they think. And and again, I go back to the atomic bomb. When they first lit that thing off, there was a small but vocal contingency of scientists that were terrified that it was going to cause an atomic reaction, where the bomb was going to, basically incinerate the atmosphere and burn up Earth. So, there was a lot of fear going on at the time. So,
There was
who
a
knows?
certain faction that wanted that to happen. They thought they
I
could tear through reality with a lot of occultists involved in the Manhattan Project, and there was people that wanted to punch through reality, even if it caused massive damage. And we actually, at this point, don't know if they succeeded or not. There could have been different junction points made at that very point there.
Oh, I'm totally convinced that I think the whole point of war, and I've said this before, the entire point of war is for um gathering. It's like going grocery shopping for energy. I think it's an entire point. And I think one of the most important points of being able to go into superposition is you're able to go into different, versions of the multiverse, or you're able to go back to those certain junction points and feed. So what you can do is you can create a situation where you have a mass energy blast, whether it's in like Wembley Stadium or whether it's on Normandy Beach, but that will always be there for you to go and feed on. And you're right, that could be. And then if you can get the alignment of something like that, along with the alignment of, if you create a shift of some sort that's in reference to World War II, oh gosh, could you imagine that? You have World War II, you have, mass misery happening, fear, horror on a scale that we've never known, right? And all over the planet. And then suddenly we were witness to those Mandela shifts. Maybe not in real time, they may have already happened, but we were witness to the sort of the after ripples of those Mandela shifts. And then those were junction points made there at that time. I know that sounds insane, but now we can start talking about these things because the Overton window's been moved. Alien, we're not alone. The most profound things are coming to fruition.
It makes me think, and we briefly talked about my World War II friend before we started here. And one thing that he worked on a lot of very interesting things when he was in. Um, One of the things that he worked on was helping to design the massive granite-proofed bunker in Colorado, where they would bring the president if everything went upside down. And of course, you know, when I was in Colorado and I saw the airport and I saw all this weird stuff and the underground rail systems and all this crazy stuff that was in the airport, because I got lost in the airport, but that's a different story. It makes me think now, because back then, of course, I thought, oh, you know, they're preparing for like whatever, whoever the enemy is, you know, whether it be Russia or some group in the Middle East or something crazy like that. But now I'm thinking about it more and more. And just as you're talking about frequencies and vibration, perhaps they were able to arm that special, because it's deep within the mountains outside of Denver. Perhaps there was more, more reasons for that than I thought of at the time. There could be something that is shielding, because you definitely can't get any kind of computer or Wi-Fi signals or anything like that through there. And there may be signal blockers of a different kind, like of a technology I don't understand, being used in that situation too.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, I think that's not just plausible. I mean, and you know, I think it's something that's that's probable. And I think all we're doing at this point, Chick, I think we're just trying to. I think we have all the pieces, or we have most of them. I think it's just a matter of moving them around right to really understand this. And I think a core point that everyone I think gets, at least the regulars to the show, is that I think that all of this dissolves. Like when we were looking into the World War II, when we were doing the World War II thing, and we were seeing all of these changes happening basically right in front of our eyes. I mean, I swear it was like we'd go away a day or two and the facts would change. But I think just like Flamenco, when he was doing the West and looking for those 1,000 years, I think whenever we were studying World War II, you see how everything shifts and moves. And I think that when that happens, and when you either observe that or you concentrate on that, that in itself perhaps can be like a minor ripple or even a minor junction point that you've created inadvertently. You know, just the fact that you've noticed something like that. And I think that because of that, if you were to take anything scientific, and that's why there's such a cloak around science and it has to do with national security and all these other things, they don't want you doing science experiments. Most of the things that you could do in terms of science, you can go to jail for if you try to do this at home. And part of the reason why is for safety, for sure. But another part of the reason why is I think when you really get down to the nuts and bolts of it, I think it still has to do with the esoteric and the occult, because it really started out that most of the great scientists that we revere nowadays, they were occultists, they were alchemists, and they dabbled in what we would call modern science. And then suddenly, I think over time we shifted to the idea of science, and we've kind of rebranded the occult. You know, and I've explained it before about like the circuitry that you can see on a motherboard inside of a computer, or you can see the circuitry on any kind of engineering device. And if you really look at it, what you're looking at, you have to charge the circuitry, you have to charge the sigil. You know, it's all going back to those kinds of things. But what we've done is given it an official sheen, an official language. So immediately it becomes scientific, and therefore it's untouchable. And you just, you know, you don't have the right contacts, the right people, you don't have the right permits, so you can't do these things. And what you're doing is you're doing basic black magic and you're charging the sigil, and that's it.
But I mean, that's the context as it's been shown to us as, you know, people. But if that technology actually belonged to different life and was just given a different name and a different context and a bit of, you know, mystery and woo woo around it, I'm seeing things in a different light right now. There's a lot of things that I'm not sure came from us, let's put it that way, because it's very
Hmm.
possible that the way that the discs are charged could be through a technology, an energy technology very similar to what you're talking about right there.
I totally think, yeah, if these Tic Tacs or whatever it is, now they can, I'm thinking, burst through a Mandela shift, or at least the sort of aftermath of whatever process they do, and we see that Mandela shift, and we see a spike in the Schumann resonance, and that could be like wherever the junction points may be, because there are certain hotspots for UFOs. Everyone knows, Area 51 Southwest, Las Vegas, apparently off the Mid-Atlantic, and then obviously off of the, California, particularly the San Diego area. So you have these hotspots where it happens, which plays into that idea of, you've got the cross section of geography and time. And certainly with geography, like we've talked about with Mount Shasta and all these other things, just like there isn't the same kind of computer device, there doesn't need to be the same kind of portal or the same kind of jump point or the same kind of gateway. There could be different gateways that serve different purposes, just like we have bits of technology. A human car is a piece of technology that has a purpose that's different than, a phone or a laptop, a smartphone or a laptop. And yet they are still scribed from the same things that, well, now we thought it was human endeavor, but it could be something else. But the point is, it's still under the banner of technology. However, they have incredibly different purposes. What I'm saying is that, and from what I'm gathering from what you're talking about with these different places and all that, they could still have those kinds of different purposes. And yet, because we still now we're freer to speculate because the Overton window has moved this week. We're now freer to speculate on these kinds of things, and we're not as far out anymore because I want to stay about 1 or 2 clicks outside of the Overton window on the Fringe. I want to stay close to the documentation, but I think now that we're in this newness, like you said, you're seeing things with new eyes. We're able to say, okay, we're here now. We can put that aside. We can put that to bed. It's done. It's over. Okay. UFOs exist. And that opens this up. The gateway document, it's real and what they were talking about. So then we can go, okay, so the gateway document is real. So we know that UFOs are real and the human beings are having contact with them, at least through the gateway process at a minimum, and through the round robin FBI document. That Buster, finds almost 99% of this stuff, or I'd say 95, because there's a lot of people who help out on Twitter and stuff. But anyway, the point being is that, now if you're talking about contact and if you're talking about either ritualized or you're talking about systematized contact, then you can start to talk about, okay, how are we going through these processes in terms of, stargates or whatever it may be, or tears in time. And then you've got CERN. It gives us the natural leap to CERN. What if CERN itself is doing something that's a bit more diabolical versus the things in the gateway process? Sounds like it was something that you just needed access through knowledge, through through education, and people say gnosis. That seems to be a big buzzword right now. But it was, you were given that knowledge, versus CERN sounds like something a bit more, I don't know, just something about it rubs me wrong.
Well, definitely the people that work there that seem to troll my accounts, regardless of what platform I'm on, which is very strange, they seem to be the opposite of spiritual people. So I'm not even sure that how they must have had the understanding through a different branch of a different cognitive branch that they were able to even approach such a, if they're doing what they say they're doing, if it's not just a cover story for something that's naturally occurring at this time, kind of more like what the Mayans would have alluded to. But I think that, we've been talking about dissolving consensus for a long time. You were talking about it, before the Lost and Found bin. And I would say, do you think that because we have now been shuffled down so many million to one or trillion to one junction points, that kind of accounts for the dissolving consensus? I think if you go down 1 million to one junction point, things are a little off, but it's mostly okay. But I think if you continuously go down junction points that are very bizarre and very left field from, straying away from what the history line should be, that's when things really get strange. And that might account for NPC phenomenon. It might account for a lot of different ME effects. It might account for the strangest, the moon and the sky, and even some of the strange things that we're coming to see now. Because, like I said, it kind of still, it feels it feels like it shouldn't be happening. It feels like there should be other events distracting us from this, but we've like sidestepped those events, and now we're onto something that it's almost like a story that's writing itself while it's going along because it was a junction point we were never supposed to take.
You bring up an incredibly important point, and what I will say is before I answer the question, let's take a catalog here, okay? The moon is now officially in Earth's atmosphere, okay? We have and it is the symbology matters. We have attractions on the moon like the Moon Museum, right? We have we have this Mandela Effect thing where Ed McMahon never worked for a Publishers Clearinghouse, where just recently here, Dick Diamonds was talking about the 7 astronauts that tragically passed away in, what was that, in 1986 or so, I think? 86, yes, where they passed away in 86 from the Challenger. He's showing me these people that have the same exact name and they look like these same exact people and they look that they're about 35, 40 years older than they would have at the time. Now, it's odd that they have the same name, and I'm not saying it's the same people, but it's going back to what that dissolving consensus that you're talking about. It's the oddness, it's the strangeness, it's the thing that shouldn't be, even if it's not the same people. Just the fact of all the variables that all these people that you line up, they look exactly like the same person. They have the exact same name. They happen to be pretty much in the same field, too, of study, by the way. Michael J. Smith, both of them are engineers. One is a different kind of engineer than the other, but no matter, they're still kind of together. Are they? Um, could they be twins? Could be. Even so, that's strange still that all had the same name. That's very odd, and they all chose sort of the same careers. But the broader point I'm making is, like you're talking about, that the sort of descending, junction points and the lessening of the likelihood, that variable dropping from 100% to like 2%, and we're in that 2% world where it took 98% of things to fall into place in order for us to get to this level of strangeness that we're at. And yes, I think you're right. And one of the things that terrifies me so much about this is I'm learning about like Hollywood movies. That's like a feedback loop. What it does is it does two things. It simultaneously informs you and it inoculates you from the truth. So if you're someone who's coming in cold, which I've got a feeling we're going to have a large population of people who are going to wake up from this UFO thing. Like I gave the parable last night of the waiter. I was at dinner and I asked the waiter if he'd heard of it. I showed him one article and he immediately was terrified and asked me, could see the fear all over him. And he asked me, are we going to be okay? And I had to soothe the waiter. And the point is that we're going to have this influx of people. And the point is that the reason why we're having this influx of people, like you said, was all of this supposed to happen? Why are we no longer fringe? Why are we becoming more and more and more mainstream with our thinking? Now, getting back on track to the Hollywood thing, getting back on track to the feedback loops of exactly what fiction is and the purpose that fiction fulfills for people. The purpose of fiction is it gives you a contemporary setting from which you can understand new things that are going to come into your existence. That's the purpose of what fiction does for you. Fiction is not a dalliance of like a flight of fancy, or it's just something that you do for enjoyment. It's a bit of programming so you can understand what is possible in the human condition, particularly this new thing called sci-fi that's been barely around for 200 years. So you talk about the parable of the waiter. Exactly. Hey man, it's a real thing. It really happened. So the point about Hollywood is everything we could reference to a movie, whether it's, was it Dark City or, whether it's, because I was told that, Dark City is kind of a literal thing, that time can stop and these things can move around us while we're all frozen still. And even that I'll talk about openly because it doesn't sound as fringe anymore. It sounds absolutely almost plausible, especially when you read things like superposition. Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you once you got to a state of clicking out in Gateway? Why wouldn't you be able to kind of roll the film reels back and forth? The point I'm trying to make is that going back to the 2012 series I did at the start of this channel, if you go back and listen to everything, the way I rolled things out at the time was a lot of speculation, a lot of fiction, a lot of creative, endeavor, and yet a lot of it seems to be sort of coming true in a way, in some strange, odd way, and not exactly true. Just like no movie is exact. I mean, we don't actually have a Neo, and yet everyone's uses the red pill thing, and yet that we're using the analogy of NPCs in game, and being in sort of this virtual reality that's all around us, this sort of Gnostic concept of reality, and there being this hidden force and the idea of an archon that is feeding off of your energy form, and all of these things that you can't see. It's all of these things that are culminating together that were kind of, you know, made in Hollywood, and it's this feedback loop. It inoculates you, and then it does inform you at the same time. And I wonder if part of my 2012 series, where I was talking about a dissolving consensus to the point to where Earth itself, or at least this vibrational frequency, becomes so distorted that you can't make heads or tails of it, if in some way that was a feedback loop that was somehow created inadvertently by me.
I think that it's almost like because you're not because you were kind of almost in a superpositioned frame of mind fiction wise. It's almost like you wrote the end of the story at the beginning.
Hmm.
As in,
I,
like, there's a
I,
lot
I
of concepts that you talked about at the very beginning that was more kind of that had more of an art edge to it. Like, I feel anyway, an artistic edge rather than scientific edge. And now the
Mhm.
scientific part is coming around and saying, well, actually, a lot of this is very, very plausible.
Yeah, it's pretty frightening. Every now and then I'll go back 2 years ago and I'll listen to something and I'll just take my earphones off and go, all right, I've had enough. It's too much. I'm just, I have no idea where it came from. So, I don't know. I don't know. It was like when we stopped the World War II, we made yeah, I could have been patterning by accident, Buster. Absolutely. Um, and like I said, Buster, it was very fortuitous for this thing to come into our lives at the time, for all the variables that had to come together. Um, no, it's before the bear videos, Evil Monkey. It's the We Died in 2012 series. But for us to get the gateway process at that time, chick, it was what we needed at the time. It was needed at the time for us to be able to understand what was happening, and it came through for us exactly what we needed. And now we understand it. And now that this UFO thing is happening, we absolutely understand things like clicking in and out. And we understand how a tic tac can be there 1 second and then the next it's gone. And it's like, yeah, we got it. We understand what's happening.
I do think also that a lot of things might be kind of like tic tacs right now, but as our perception is changing, you're going to look at the exact same thing and see something totally different as this goes forward. I think that it's kind of a big cosmic joke that next year is called 2020 because 2020 is the euphemism for perfect vision, clear
Hmm.
vision, and I think that that's going to be very literal and very satanic Seinfeld next year.
Oh, total satanic side fell. And for anybody that knows, it's not a knock on a show. It's actually a compliment to Seinfeld. We're saying that the show about Seinfeld it was sort of the first sort of, they were the original trolls before the internet was big. They were the original kind of men, excuse me, they were the original kind of memes. They would have different memes that would represent each one of them, whether it was Jerry or George or whatever, and Elaine, all of them, obviously Kramer. They all were memes of themselves. They were parodies of themselves, and they kind of trolled on people, and they kind of ruined things for people, and just made things kind of just ruined it. And we were saying that this is an upped version of that. So if there's any Seinfeld fans out there, we're not knocking the show. We were using it as a template for the way in which the Mandela Effect seems to react. That it has this twisted sense of humor about it, almost as if it has to attach something spiteful to it whenever something happens. And it's very odd, and it's just weird.
It is, and it has like a cognitive sense of humor. So it's not just, going through the junction points of some kind of inanimate, matrix or, fluid time or electrical sea or however we want to see that. but there is definitely something that is smirking and laughing away and putting little hints here and there for the people who have the eyes to see and ears to hear. And it's just, there's so many different elements to this that I'm not sure how, you know, if you sat down, you tried to write a book about the situation that's going on right now, I have no idea how you would get all the strings to tie together and for it not to be, to sound completely insane to someone that's outside of it, you know? I think it has
That's
to be just kind of us.
that's an exquisite, like, what you just said there was perfect. If we were to take this channel and the timeline between me, you, Buster, and even everybody who comes back all the time, the regulars, and we were to put this together in fiction form, they would say this is too, it's not plausible. What you're talking about is so implausible and it's just so over the top. It sounds ridiculous, and yet this is reality. So that's what I'm saying about. I like that it's aware of itself. It's aware of, and I've always said that about ME. You know, whether I'm labeling it correctly or not, I've always felt as if it's aware of itself and it's aware of what it's doing in terms of the sense of humor. It gets that we get, you know, this channel, people around this channel, the Mandela effect, I feel, I'm just saying in a gut level, I feel it gets that we get that it has this kind of this sense of humor, this almost memetic sense of humor. And someone brought up about uh, I forgot it specifically what it was, but it brought me to this idea of the egregore. And what an egregore is a group of people. They'll create a thought form and they'll put it out there, and it gains a life of itself. And that's exactly what memes are. That's what memetic magic is, and that's exactly what we may have inadvertently created, was these small little egregores that go out there. You can Google it later and just, you know, check it out and stuff. But it's these thought forms that sort of come back, and that's what these kind of memes are and everything. And it's like Seinfeld, yada yada yada. Remember that sayings or catchphrases, or, you know, those are kind of egregores. And you know, there's a certain kind of baggage that's attached to each one of those, because you can say yada 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 and immediately I encapsulate the show, I encapsulate the 90s, I encapsulate the character Elaine, you encapsulate a lot of things that go with it. And for the person hearing that, that could transport them back to an emotional state and do something and trigger them for the good or for the worse. So there's so much out there to deal with this. It's just, my head is exploding.
I think that that's like the core of how that works, is that when you have such a simple concept, like such a simple meme concept, and it's portrays an idea, and the vast amount of people, no matter how different they are, all react to it almost exactly the same. That's probably the most powerful way you could funnel attention or energy into one thing. And in the certain circumstance we find ourselves in now, in the 2% world, I like that coin term, and I'm going to keep it.
It's all yours.
The 2% world, that was so unlikely to happen. When you unleash that kind of uniform attention or uniform energy going through it, I think that's why it has such an overwhelming and bizarre effect on everything. And I think that a lot of us know that outside of the 2% world, memes did not change things like they did here. And things
Hmm.
did not go the way that you know things have gone here. Like, what I'm trying to say basically is, not just in the United States but in different countries, memes didn't change elections and things didn't happen the way that they happened here. Yes, it's
Hmm.
reality here, and a lot of things have gone a lot of different ways, but I know enough people that came after us that have confirmed for me through information that only people from there would know, that it didn't go that way in the 80% world, or the 95% world, if that's what we want to call it. The people who are
Hmm.
still in the mainstream of time are not experiencing the things that we are getting to right now. We're getting this kind of cheat sheet experience where we're getting to see the deeper levels of what's going on and getting to see mysteries kind of unravel right in front of us, and there's no limits whatsoever in this place.
And I'm glad you said that, because I'm going to bounce off that. And one thing I made this big assumption that we're going to have this huge influx of the population now that we know UFOs exists and that the Navy is categorizing different kind of operations with UFOs. They practically said they existed all the way back to 1983. My contact has always said they've always been with us. So with this information of this idea that we're not alone anymore, I think the most frightening thing, Chick, would be if we don't have an influx of the population into, suddenly these chat rooms, not just us, for subs and all that, but it would be more frightening if everyone remains asleep and calm. That would be terrifying to me. If you really think about that, then that would mean that we could be in each living truly our own experience, and we just happen to be bumping into each other a couple times a week, and we are spinning off into way different worlds. And in fact, the way that we're interfacing may not be the way in which we think we're interfacing. That would be terrifying if that's the case.
And I'm pretty confident, and of course we can't say with 100% because it's very difficult to navigate what's going on here, but just the interactions I've had with yous is plural. We've had the
Right.
same interactions a couple of times, and we've had the same conversations a couple of times, and it's not like, oh, you don't remember them. It's you genuinely never had those conversations with me, but I've had them with you a bunch of different times. So I can see that even just with our conversations and our research, it's happening with the two of us. So I imagine it's happening with most people here in the 2%.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
kind
I
of
think,
scary.
yeah, and when you showed me that that snapshot, and I don't have that, and it was so surreal because I didn't write that. I didn't send that to you. I don't have that. Um that was really, and I should have been more disoriented, but that shows you how far we've been into this, because we've been into this for so long now. All of us together, all of us, everyone in the chat, you, Buster, everybody, that I was only disoriented for about a minute, not even a minute, and then it was like, yeah, I didn't, this is another version. It was a shift. We had a lot of shifts that week, and I was like, I accepted that, and that's just it. We're back to that, the 2% thing. It's just, the,
Could you imagine how crazy that would have been, like, if that happened, like, closer to the first? Like, if it happened way, way, way ago when we were just, still talking about C3PO's leg and different things like that. But
I
because
would
it's
have,
happening now, it's totally different.
I don't know if I would have recovered like I did. Not completely. I don't think I would have recovered. I seriously, or I would have gone into such deep denial. I probably wouldn't have wanted to talk to you anymore. So I'm just saying it would have been so terrifying because I would have associated that with anything around me at the time. I swear, if I was wearing a blue shirt, I would never wear a blue shirt again. That kind of terror. But now that I've been kind of, through this process, this training process, this breaking down and rebuilding of me, this grooming of whatever it is, I go, yeah, okay, that's, yeah, there's different versions of reality, and yeah, okay, let's move on here.
I think that something else that's kind of that a lot of people already know is that obviously in the 2%, it's going to be likely that 80% of people won't wake or care because 80% of people, their main node of consciousness is not in the 2% world. It's
Hmm.
it's in
Hmm.
it's in the mainstream flow of things. So even though they're here, like, I don't think they're going to react the way that we expect them to react. And I don't think it's because it's not important, because obviously it's very important. But I think that whatever is going on, it's that the 2%ers are the ones that are going through this very bizarre learning experience. And like for a lot of us, it is almost like the waiter, like, is this safe? But we have to come back to the realization that it's always been safe for us. Every time
Hmm.
things have flown off the handle or gone out the window, we just go to a new junction point and everything's fine. So same thing here. If everything flies off the handle and they're not friendly and it's not good, then tomorrow it'll have never happened at all. And people say, what are you talking about? That never happened. And
Right.
everything will be fine for us. So I'm just saying, don't fear. Everything is going to be okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing too, is that would be an interesting, it's going to be so interesting if no one reacts to this, because even today I was at the store and I was picking up a sandwich, and I was just looking around and everybody was fine, everything was okay, so I was, but and there's been a full on blitz on the media, MSNBC, all the main anything that a normal person would be watching. It's been covering. It's been covered on what Good Morning America,
Fox
ABC News,
News. Yeah.
Fox News. Oh yeah, that Tucker Carlson guy. He is just like on it, man.
Like I
That guy.
saw someone tweet that. Yeah, that's crazy, isn't it? You'd think they would ignore it and just be like, "That's too crazy." Our viewer, like especially their viewers,
Mm-hmm.
would not be
Mm-hmm.
into anything fringe as far as I can see, but they're reporting on it, so you know it's crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Jeremy Crow. Yeah, that's the new term, man. The 2%ers, I guess. So that's what we are. All of us here
Yeah,
who understand.
that's us.
That's the probability, man. It's just bizarre. It's so weird. Oh my gosh. So I don't know where we're going to be at in the next week because it's only been a week since we talked, and I swear it feels like a year. It really feels like a year.
Really, yeah, I'm beyond spun around and confused, and at the same time, oddly calm because we've been living in a surrealist painting for a long time now. So the weirder it gets, it would be surprising if it didn't get weird. But it's getting weird very, very fast. Let's put it that way.
And it did. It dawned on me once I knew, the moon was an Earth's atmosphere. I knew that most people wouldn't freak out over that because most people don't understand the ramifications to the moon flight, to the Van Allen belts, all of those kinds of things. And just like when people we still have the footage. It's crisp and clear of the NASA officials saying, "Oh, we lost the telemetry data to the moon. We lost that technology." And I consider that part of like if we actually did go to the moon in some version and some pre-shift or something, that it was a punishment, that it was taken away from us. Civilizations lose technology. You hear about civilizations that were much greater than this one, far, far, far back, with much, much better technology, and that was lost. And then it's reset somehow. We may have already lived through something like that. I'm not entirely sure, but anyway, the point being is that the moon was in Earth's atmosphere. I was waiting for the deluge of people to freak out over that. Nothing. So now with this UFO thing, last night I went to bed convinced that there could end up being panic, but now I'm not entirely sure that we're even going to see more than maybe a minor bump in terms of people turning to alternative sources for understanding the environment around them. And I hear a lot that people say, "Oh, well, people are just worn down. They have families, they have work, they have." Well, so do I. I have all of those things. I don't have anything special. I don't live off of. I have to live off of my labor and what I do. I don't have a trust fund or anything. So it's like, hey, I have to do all of those things, and yet I still pay attention. So I don't understand.
I think it's an excuse, in all honesty. There's no way that you're working so hard that you can't take 5 minutes to look at what's on the mainstream news. Like, you don't even have to search the corners of a fringe community or anything. Turn on the mainstream news, turn on cable, and they're telling you nobody's working that hard that they can't handle it. That they can't see it is rather the truth is that they can't handle it, and that's why they're not looking at it, or because they're just not truly awake into it, you know? It's
Hmm.
kind of like the words might be completely just going over their heads. Like it just sounds like blah blah blah, and they can't decode exactly the magnitude of what's being reported.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Well, we're coming close to the end of this episode. Can we get some more thumbs up? I know we had up to a point more than 110 people watching, but we only have 56 thumbs up. So for the people who haven't given us a thumbs up, hopefully, just through the sheer number of documents we have here cataloged, the amount of episodes that we have in our past, hopefully the thumbs up would help us along in terms, because I know that we're not being put into the recommended sections of a lot that's out there. So, um, and think about this, Chick. It was just less than what, a week ago that we recorded a Mandela Effect live, and now that's small potatoes in comparison to, I mean, all of this madness.
And like you said, there's more information to come. I haven't heard what the information is, guys, but it's already kind of been confirmed that what your contact said before was
Yep.
correct, because now you're seeing it's confirmed in the media. So that
Yep.
that gives a lot of weight to whatever he says next. But like I said before, don't be afraid. Everything's going to be okay. And it's going to be a crazy learning experience where we're going to get to understand mysteries and see things that that mostly everyone else is not going to see, maybe ever. So I think that while it is crazy and scary and every other kind of thing, it's also a very weird privilege and a very weird, but very uh, would you say blessed path, or would you say like just unique path to go through in life? Like you never thought that this is the way your life was going to go,
Yeah,
unless maybe some of you did, but I think for the most part nobody ever thought things would wind up here in this way. But what better group of people to wind up with, and what better place to be at this point in time? I'm not complaining.
absolutely.
I'd much rather be here with this than dealing with World War III back there. So
Hmm.
I'm definitely not complaining. I think that we're in a strange way very blessed.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I totally agree. And I think that's a great way to end it. So there it is, folks. And everybody, thank you so much for the top chat. Sorry, for the super chats. Thank you for the thumbs up. Thank you for just showing up and listening. And well, who knows? Next week, the Lost and Found Pen. I'm going to be traveling back that Saturday. So I won't, there will be no Lost and Found Pen next Saturday. However, we'll be back the Saturday after that. And maybe Chick, myself, Buster, we could do something. We'll try to get something out there, and obviously for me in the meantime, I'll I'll transmit something while I'm in training in Wisconsin. So, all right, everybody, we'll see you the week after next.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.